Can we start? Great. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's session on energy transition in the IDFC Pavilion. We have a very distinguished panel with us here today, and we are certain that we're going to have a very interesting discussion. My name is Dmitry Aksakov. I represent VEB.RF, Russia's development bank, and let me quickly introduce our panel. So, today we have with us, starting from my left, Sean Kidney, the CEO of Climate Bonds Initiative. We have Nathalie Layani, the Chief Sustainability Officer at CDC, the French Development Bank. We have Pauline Leon, the Head of Sustainable Development at Rosatom, the Russian nuclear energy company. And we have Mustafa Klish, the climate expert and climate facility coordinator at IDFC. And we have online with us Bruno Aranha, the managing director of BNDES, Brazil's development bank. So, as you well know, the energy transition is a very important topic. And a lot of time has been dedicated at this COP26 forum to discussing what shape the energy transition should take, what energy sources are the energy sources of the future, what the transition is going to look like. And it still seems that there is no common understanding of what it should be like, and there is still debate going on. So hopefully we'll be able to learn some interesting things during today's panel. Let me pose the first question to Nathalie. So the list of countries worldwide which have announced goals for attaining carbon neutrality is getting bigger and bigger every day. For example, Russia recently announced its carbon neutrality goal of 2060. And what exactly is the role of your development institution in helping to reach these decarbonization goals?
Thank you very much, Dimitri. So I'm the head of sustainability at Caisse des Dépôts. Caisse des Dépôts is the French National Public Bank, but it's also an asset owner. Basically, we manage savings from French citizens, but also civil servants' pensions. So we are also kind of a pension fund. And our role is, of course, well, to support national economic development, like all developing banks, public development banks. But it's also, I would say, to fill market failure and to, well, support the implementation of national policies, especially in the fields of energy transition and climate action. So we're very active in, well, accelerating the implementation of French national climate objective, which is carbon neutrality by 2050.
Right.
And we have developed an, I would say, ambitious energy transition policy, and I can detail it if you wish to.
Sure, yeah. And I understand within CDC you have your own framework for how the energy transition in France is going to look like. What energy sources you are going to switch to first, and which energy sources are going to be the dominant ones by 2050. Can you please tell us more about the framework that you use at CDC?
Sure. Well, at the national level in France, we have two important documents. The low carbon national strategy that really explains sector by sector what should be the trajectory of CO2 emission reduction. And we also have the pluriannual energy programmation that sets targets in terms of renewable energy, diversification and development, that sets targets in terms of gas consumption reduction, in terms of nuclear energy role into our national energy mix. So this is the framework for us, and
right.
Caisse des Dépôts Group, well, chose to finance part of this objective, so we will finance more than 1/3 of the implementation of the national low-carbon strategy, to put it in a nutshell.
Right, well, that's a very significant role for the institution.
So, yeah, we will mobilize 15 billion euros during 5 years in order to finance renewables.
Right, right. Well, staying with development banks, let us move now to Brazil. Bruno, could you please tell us more about BNDES role in financing energy transition and the overall strategy of decarbonization of Brazil?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to discuss this important in this important meeting. Brazil, just reminding that Brazil announced to be a net zero until 2050, and we raised our ambitions our climate ambitions to commit to reduce our emissions in 50% until 2030, and also our illegal deforestation until 20 and to 2028. And in this regard, energy sector, we committed also to raise our renewable energy to 45% of our entire system until 2030. And in fact, I think that the development bank, our main role is to mobilize private, public, national, international, refundable and non-refundable resources to support our local projects that will make possible these commitments. And in this regard, BNDES, the Brazilian Development Bank, has a huge history as we are the second largest renewable energy funder in the world, and also we supported our wind and solar projects that after 10 years represent 12.5% of our whole system. So 10 years ago, we didn't have solar and wind projects in Brazil, and as a work of BNDES and the private sector, we increase wind and solar in our energy matrix in this 12%, 10% in wind and to 0.5% in solar. And so I think that we have this mission. Brazil recently launched a green project, and it's around $50 billion in order to support our growth in green sense, and BNDES is part of this project, and we will invest around $20 billion in the following 5 years, and 40% of it is in renewable energy. So I think it's we are very engaged in this movement in order to clean our economy and try to help and support this transition to a neutral carbon economy.
It's very impressive to look at the work that you have done, given that you, like you were saying, 10 years ago, there were practically no renewable energy projects in Brazil. This is really, really impressive. I now wanted to ask Mustafa, as someone who has a very broad view of what the development institutions are doing around the world, what are the commonalities and the differences that you see, And what changes do you think should be done to the approaches that the development institutions are taking to financing decarbonization?
Thank you very much, Dimitri, for your question. First, I would like to thank you for the invitation to this panel, which is dealing with an important issue, because it's a very key issue for the successful journey towards 2050. Energy is indeed at the heart of the challenge, as illustrated by all the consequences that happened when the prices is increasing or decreasing. So to address this such complex issue, a large variety of instruments are existing, such as policy, social, economical, financial instruments, which are all important. But of course, the banks cannot play all these instruments. They are more working on the financial ones, and they need to mobilize them, in fact, that are complementary to those of the government. And this is the most important, is how the government is putting the right policies, the right social framework for them to work. Without that, it's impossible for the banks to work. So the regulation gives an incentive to enterprises, but also to individuals, in order to help them to implement the long-term loans and guarantees that are the important tools for the banks. And as Climate Facility, we are actually working to support the banks, IDFC members, to work on these instruments, and also to try to look what are the conditions in which these tools can be used by IDFCs. To conclude my remark, I would like just to also insist on the fact that energy is not a mitigation issue. It is also an adaptation issue, since energy is using a lot of natural resources and also water, for example, to cool the power plants, and also to clean the solar panels. So we have to, in fact, to tackle the energy not only as mitigation, but also under the angle of the adaptation.
Thank you, Mustafa. Paulina, I'm now going to move to you. Well, as I was saying at the start of this panel, there is still a lot of debate what the energy mix of the future is going to look like. But I understand that there is an agreement between many countries that nuclear energy is going to play a very significant role in the energy mix in the future. Can you please tell us more about the view of Rosatom in this regard, and tell us more about your plans?
Yes, that's really the fact that a lot of discussions about what kind of mark we need to put over the nuclear in regard of its sustainability and climate efficiency. But the thing is that probably everyone is know that nuclear energy is almost as clean as wind power, for example, because we have almost the same figures for our carbon footprint throughout the life cycle. But the story is that there are a lot of rumors and fears around nuclear, so we suffer a little bit challenging to obtain this sustainability compliance. And when we do not have the sustainability compliance for nuclear energy, we simply cannot, do not have much instruments to finance our projects. And the complexity of this situation is that nuclear projects, they are quite big projects. They're really large. And one nuclear power plant costs about $10 billion. So it's already a very complicated issue to find financing for this project. And when they said that some countries do not treat nuclear as a sustainable and green one, we suffer much more challenges in this way. And but the fact is that we see quite a big step for, I would say, for even last year, because first in regard of the sustainability compliance, because First of all, we have a CBI green market for nuclear. Thank you very much. And so basing on that and basing on Chinese green taxonomy, green bonds taxonomy, we have also this nice Russian green project taxonomy that was issued this year. And nuclear energy is also marked as a green source of energy. And together with that, many countries now, they're thinking about developing their own taxonomy. As far as I know, the UK government considering such a document. So when we have fixed this green and sustainable status for any source of energy, it is much more easier to go further to make our climate action and climate impact, because the now situation is that we cannot exclude any low carbon source of energy, because we have very short time to act. And thanks to this green and sustainable compliance, we have a chance just to contribute. And taxonomy, to my opinion, they really help people. They really help investors, help companies that find their green path to choose proper energy mix.
Right.
Just when any energy source is marked as a green one and sustainable one, it's much more easier for companies, for people, for governments to make their decision on their low carbon path.
Understood. Thank you, Paulina. And I also wanted to ask you about, you were speaking about labeling energy as green or non-green, and also labeling financial instruments as green or non-green. Has labeling the nuclear energy as green, has it in practical sense helped you? Has it helped you to attract financing on more favorable terms?
Actually, my answer is yes. So first of all, this labeling is about reputation of the company and reputation of the source of energy. So it becomes much more easier to negotiate any projects, any our future plans, for example, for small modular reactors. Just people do not waste time for considering if you are sustainable or not, because we have these markets, not only Russian but also Chinese, international one, and that really helps. And we're quite successful in negotiating financial terms, because, for example, we have concluded this. I think this summer there were 2 financial deals for our project in Turkey, when we have attracted about $8 million on ESG-related basis for the nuclear power plant. So it really helps, and we see quite a big appetite for green and sustainable activity. And we understand that if we have some kind of products that is labeled as a sustainable one, so we have a chance for more favorable financing conditions.
Great, thank you, Paulina. Well, since we have started talking about labeling financial instruments, the next one is for you, Sean. The CBI label for green bonds is probably the most, or at least one of the most sought after, desired labels for investors focused on sustainable investing. And what is your view on how coming up with taxonomies with universally accepted green labels helps companies finance their transition to low carbon future?
Well, first, you're very generous, Andre. Thank you. You know, markets are created by boundaries. They don't really work very well when the edges are like marshmallow. And we need rule sets. In this particular case, with a market that has grown fantastically in the fixed income space, we now have about $1.6 trillion US of green bonds globally. When I started this, we had a couple of billion. So things have grown. France is an extraordinary global leader in green bond issuance, I want to say. And CDC has been fantastic. and it's worth noting that Russia's also seen, not only your story, but Russian Rail, when they issued 2 certified climate bonds, to pick up the label question, in Europe a couple of years ago now, they got the lowest ever interest rates they'd ever got in Swiss francs and in euros. Now that is worth a prize. That is a prize. And we've seen Moscow. I was on a panel with the Deputy Mayor of Moscow last week who was telling me they got 20 basis points benefit in domestic, in rubles, which really surprised me for the green against vanilla bonds. So this is a domestic issue as well as international issue. So let's be clear, that's why we're here. Because we've been able to get excitement around the instrument, which is a very simple instrument really. All it is I'm issuing you a standard bond and I'm promising to only use it for green. To do that, we've got to have a bit of clarity about what is green to make it work. Now, that changes because what we need to do to address the green challenge of the millennia, of the era of our lives, climate change, has been changing. The IPCC report of the last few years are getting tougher and tougher. Why? Because for the last 30 years, we've been saying, oh, that's really bad, that climate science stuff. What about we just do this? Will that be okay? And that's been a national climate change plan, and it has meant that we have failed globally. Emissions have continued to rise. They dropped 8% last year because we stopped flying, etc., but they bounced up 16% this year. We're back on trajectory for utter catastrophe. And the fires that are raging in northern Siberia, in the permafrost now, will become a normal thing in the future with what we're doing. That's what we need to understand first. There are some implications of understanding what the future looks like. The implications are tough. They are much, much tougher than they were when we were looking 10 years ago, thinking we'd have a glide path like this. Because we've gone like that, we're not going to go like that. The International Energy Agency said it all in its World Energy Outlook. The IPCC said it with its methane report. We have a problem, and this is a problem for Russia. There is, according to Fatih Birol, the executive director of the IEA, no room for any new gas or oil. We have to work with existing gas and oil, we have to reduce the emissions, and we have to stop. Now, I'm going to tell you, in Poland and Germany right now, this is deeply confronting because their climate change plans are predicated on more gas. And they're no longer consistent with the European Commission's 2030 commitment. And we're having a bit of an argument in Europe about this at the moment. We're having an argument also in Singapore and Indonesia, and in Japan, and in South Africa. Exactly the same thing. But this is a necessary argument because we have failed in the past to make the bridge between what the science is telling us, and now it's sharper than ever, and what our national plans are, and now we've really got to tough it out and work it out. In the work we're doing globally on taxonomies, we've been working in China, where I was a member of the People's Bank of China Green Finance Task Force in 2014. The EU level, the taxonomy we were talking about before, I've been one of the architects of the European taxonomy. This question is being played out. We have managed to say science-driven. It must be science-driven, not policy-driven, because of that thing I said before. And as a result, we now have clear rules which are saying hydro is in, or at least in temperate zones. In tropical, it's complicated because of the methane leakage or methane, so on again. Green hydrogen is in. We are going to see an unbelievable boom in the next 5 years of green hydrogen development in places with really good irradiation potential, and the price of green hydrogen by 2030 will be cheaper than the price of gas without a carbon price. At that point, well, Gazprom has to find a different business model. It has a real problem going forward. It has a real problem. And you will see this already being reflected in gas contracts around the world that tend to be 6-year tenor, not 30-year now, for offtake agreements, because people are now worried about the future pricing of gas. And, well, nuclear. In the technical expert group report of the European Commission that I was the lead author of, we clearly said nuclear is low carbon. Let's get rid of these arguments, which still prevail, that nuclear is not low carbon. It is. And I will always say, I would rather close down a coal plant and a gas plant before I close down a nuclear plant. We also said we could not make a judgment as a technical expert group on the what we call the do no civilian harm issues, the waste issues, so on. Muy complicado, way above my pay grade. So we referred it to the experts, and the Commission continues to run a process. Now, I have to say I'm not a big fan of nuclear. Not necessarily for these reasons, although everyone worries about a Fukushima or a Chernobyl, right? I mean, you'd be mad not to worry about it. The reason I'm not a fan is it takes too damn long.
Yeah.
And we've got to get emissions down by 2030, 55%. Whereas certainly in Europe, I don't know about Russia, you'll be able to tell us, it's going to take 10 to 15 years. Well, in Finland, it's looking like 20 years to build a new nuclear plant. That's useless to us, frankly, utterly useless. Now, existing nuclear, I'm a big fan of recognising capital maintenance improvements which keep nuclear plants operating so that we can ensure we don't build gas plants instead, in Eastern Europe, for example. So these are the things that are part of the labelling scheme. The hard part, the really challenging part, is the existing oil and gas network. We now know, thanks to satellite data of the last 2 years, that the methane leakage around the world is horrendous. From Russia, from Turkmenistan, from Indonesia, from Texas is the worst of all. And as a result, the effective emissions from our gas-fired power stations are way higher than we expected once you bring that in. We've got to address this. This is a disaster. And we've seen the methane chapter in the IPCC report, which is an utterly terrifying bit of science because of the impact on the global climate. So we've got to address that. We need to incentivise investments to fix that in the existing gas, flaring, capping it and so on. I think these things got to be green, seen as green. But new, nada, nada, nada. And that's kind of where we're going with it. Now, in a labelling scheme that flows on from a taxonomy, first for green bonds, now for equities, now for bank reporting, now for investor reporting in Europe, it is everything. And it has a fantastic opportunity attached to it. A common language, science-driven, around the world means we can standardise investments, standardise incentives. Christine Lagarde, green quantitative easing will be linked to the taxonomy. Standardise everything in a way we have not been able to do it in these COP discussions for the last 30 years. That's the prize. It is within reach. It's like just there. I think in the next 12 months, this will become very, very clear. Back to you, Andre.
Thank you very much for the very interesting remarks, Sean. I just wanted to ask you a quick follow-up question. Well, given, although there are some commonly accepted standards, labeling standards internationally, such as CBI, still there are many of them, and there are many disclosure standards. And you know very well that there have been scandals in many countries, in the United States, in Europe, accusations of greenwashing, etc. Do you think we are converging towards common standards of green investment around the world?
Well, Andre, this morning, we launched the Common Ground Taxonomy between the EU and China, the first draft of it, which we've been working on behalf of the European Commission with the PBOC, the People's Bank of China, as a shot on that particular area. We're also, next Tuesday, launching the first draft of the ASEAN Transitions Taxonomy, which will be consistent. The South African taxonomy that's now been launched by the government down there is absolutely consistent with the European taxonomy. The Colombian taxonomy that we also had a hand in, I'm going to tell you, was launched last month, which is broadly consistent with the European taxonomy, and so on and so on. So the truth is, we live in a federation. We live in a world of multiple governments. We wear different clothes in different places. When I go to Indonesia, I wear a batik shirt. Beautiful batik shirt, much nicer than this. And of course,
looking at me.
well, I just want you to know that.
Okay.
And when I go to Indonesia, my taxonomy will also wear a batik shirt. So we're working on an Indonesian taxonomy. It'll have flavours for Indonesia. There are some issues that are Indonesian specific that we've got to tease out. In Europe, there are lots of Eurocentric measures in the European taxonomy. That's inevitable, as there should be. Our challenge is to keep them broadly consistent and interoperable. And that is what we're working on with the EU-China work, and under the International Platform on Sustainable Finance that represents half the world's economy now and half the world's population, the EU-led program, we have got working parties looking at harmonisation. So it will look different. It should look different because, after all, we're a lot of different countries, but we want to be interoperable, and we want that capital to flow from where the capital is held. That is Europe, Japan, the US, Canada, and China. And we need to make sure that we remove the speed bumps if it's going to flow. So that's happening. That's working. And I'm going to say even with BND, and we've got a deep and very fruitful relationship with BND in Brazil. The same conversation is what we're having there too. So it includes Brazil, includes India. We've started work on a taxonomy project, funnily enough, in this area. Same principle. So it'll look like where all the world leaders of the G20 or wearing different suits and different clothes, but fundamentally the structure of the taxonomies will be the same.
Actually, if you don't mind, I would like to add. That was exactly my thought, because we really suffer having different standards. We understand that every country, every region has its own specifics, has its own challenges in regard of the natural resources, the existing energy mix, but the harmonizing all these principles is really would be really helpful, because even for nuclear energy now we have this Russian taxonomy with no board specific criteria. We have Chinese these green bonds catalog marking nuclear energy also as green, but with additional specific criteria. We have CBI principles with nuclear in a green zone, but no, as far as I remember, there is no marked procedure for verification, so we cannot use this. And we have, at last, we have this EU taxonomy, which now says, together with that nuclear energy is low carbon, and this April, we have received the conclusion of GRC Institute that said that it do no significant harm, at least not much as other sustainable verified sources of energy, but we still know this label for sustainable. So we just need to, as a company, as a sector, we just need to understand what specific criteria do we need to focus to be treated as a sustainable company, or what technology should be, what technological changes should be approved to go to aligned with these criteria. So thank you very much for this. Very much looking forward. Thank you.
So yes, clear labeling and transparency are of paramount importance. I will just add one thing from my side, from VEB. We were the developer of Russia's official taxonomy, and we realized that there is already European taxonomy, and there are common approaches to green finance around the world. So we decided not to reinvent the wheel. We decided to model our taxonomy on what is accepted internationally. But we needed to have a local document in order to be able to link the government support measures to green status of financial instruments. Sean has touched upon several very important things. The transition and the transition energy sources, and also the need to develop new technologies of the future. I now wanted to come back to development banks. We all know that the economies of our countries are much more complicated than purely green energy sources, right? There are manufacturing plants which probably, many of which probably do not comply with strictest ecological standards. There are oil and gas companies, there are coal plants, etc. And shutting down these facilities would result in significant unemployment, in probably social unrest, etc. And so if we look at the ESG abbreviation, when we promote E, sometimes the S, the social angle, has to suffer. So do you think, I will start with you, Natalie, do you think it's compatible to promote both decarbonization and also maintaining the social element of the puzzle?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that when you're a public national development bank and you choose to support your state objective of being carbon neutral by 2050, well, there's no many ways to do it. Sean said it. You have to be science-based, and the science is very clear. I mean, our Bible is the AIA report. You have to exit from coal. You have to stop financing new projects and new exploitation projects in the oil and gas sector. And as regards nuclear energy, as Caisse des Dépôts, a French institution, we are neutral on the issue. And I'd like really to emphasize that we want a common language based on science, and we don't want any interference with political issues. We need a common language that is based on experts' evaluation, assessment, and as being a member of the Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance, this is the message we will send next week. The Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance will publish a document supporting the EU's taxonomy, but really emphasizing the fact that we need to trust the experts group, the work done by Sean and the other experts, and really not have any interference. So as an issuer of green bonds, we consider as green renewable energies and hydrogen and etc. The other sources of energies can be considered as transition energies, but not as green. So to answer your question, of course, in order to be aligned on a 1.5 scenario, which is our common responsibility, we have to bear in mind the social side effects of the transition. And as many other French institutional investors, we built up a coalition on just transition to engage companies we are investing in, especially in the energy sector, in the oil and gas sector, to integrate just transition issues. So we engage them to be aligned on a 1.5 scenario. We engage oil and gas companies to diversify their activities. We accompany them. We exited from coal and from non-conventional energies, but we try to support companies that are shifting their model. But we do ask them to present us an ambitious climate strategy on the three scopes, and also to anticipate the social side effects of this transition. So we really engage them on how they deal with social dialogue, how they anticipate power plants closings, how they will retrain workers, and how they invest also in long life training. So just transition engagement as an institutional investor is as important now as climate alignment with a 1.5 degree scenario.
But I have to say, Andre, we have to be brave. We can't squib on what needs to be done following the science. Yeah. And like the Gilets jaunes, right? We were brave, but we made mistakes in not thinking about just transition. That doesn't mean the transition wasn't needed. And so in South Africa, we're working at the moment. Yeah. There is a pushback by the Mine Workers Union to stop coal. But actually, there is no future whatsoever for coal in South Africa. What we need to do is carry the mine workers and their families, not to protect their jobs in aspic, as if somehow or other we can stop the change. And this will be exactly the same thing in Russia too. It's important to create new, productive green futures. And one thing the World Energy Outlook does, which is very, very powerful, is it shows the increased GDP from shifting to low carbon and the greater number of jobs. And that's exactly right. Now, what we need to do, or at least in the public sector, is make sure we focus those jobs on people who are losing those jobs. That's a just transition. What a just transition is not, is protecting people in jobs that have got to go.
Exactly, yeah. But it's our responsibility as development banks to, finance the diversification of these companies so that they don't have to lay off, but also to maybe finance the training and the real transition. But I couldn't agree more with what you said about anticipating the side effects.
And if I hear you correctly, you not only finance the green projects, you also consult companies on how they can transition to greener selves.
Yeah, as a member of the Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance, with like other institutional investors, we committed to align our portfolio with the 1.5 degree scenario, to align all our activities with the 1.5 degree scenario. So we engage companies on what I said. If they don't present us an ambitious diversification plan, we exit from them. But if they make that effort, we definitely support them, and as I said, we engage them also on not only on their climate strategy, but on their just transition strategy.
Right.
So it is part of the criteria for Caisse de dépôt of responsible investment.
Makes a lot of sense. Bruno, I wanted to ask you, just like Russia, Brazil is very much dependent on oil. And we in Russia understand that oil and gas are not going to go completely anytime soon. And this is why, for example, we in Russia developed the second section of our taxonomy, which is dedicated to transition projects. We, although we realize that oil and gas are not green areas, we understand that many projects which have positive ecological effects can be realized in these industries. For example, dealing with associated petroleum gas, converting it into electricity or power source instead of flaring it, etc. How about Brazil? How are you dealing with less clean, less green sectors of the economy as a development bank?
Well, first of all, I would like to stress this statement that we need to do a just transition. We are a development country, so we are in a different stage, and we need to have customized solutions for each country. And in this sense, we are as we are a development bank, we decided this year to stop to finance new coal energy plants and to focus in renewable energy. And I think that we can work together in the economic development with the decarbonization agenda. So we're focusing on projects of wind power and solar, and in the poorest area of Brazil, so the northeast, the semi-arid area, and all these most of the projects that make possible to increase of 0% to 10% wind power. They are conducted. They were already in this area. And I think that in relation to oil and gas, I mean that we need also to support, as our colleague said, to support the transition, to support the modernization, investment in technology in order to be more efficient, the exploitation of oil and gas. Also trying to develop other technologies in order to capture the carbon, and also support projects of reforestation. As in Brazil, we have a commitment of 15 million hectares of reforestation that we can raise, and the companies could be part of it, and then part of these emissions could be offset with this project. So we have an exclusion list, as I said, coal is part of it, but at the same time we need to support the companies to make this transition. And there are some oil companies that are moving and diversifying, as we are discussing now, to, for example, a wind, offshore wind, make huge investments in solar, So trying to support them and make this reskilling of the employees in order they make possible for them to have these opportunities in these new green jobs is very important. The coal plants here in Brazil they are concentrated in the south. So as we are trying to support new activities in these areas. So as our colleague said, not to try to protect the same jobs, but like make these conditions to this transition for solar, for wind, for example, ecotourism and commerce services in order to absorb these people and then make this just transition that is so important in countries like Brazil and Russia.
Right. Thank you very much. So I see a lot of similarities between BNDES and CDC. You have completely exited coal. You are supporting companies to transition to the greener future, and you are all in on renewable energy. Mustafa, I also wanted to ask you a more broader view. How do you see the members, how do you see the different development banks balancing these two goals, green future and also caring about the broader society, people who have jobs in the relatively dirty so-called sectors?
This is a great question. Maybe I would like just to come back to the standardization issue because it's an important one, and maybe you can give the experience of IDFC on that. You know,
sure.
Maybe to introduce that, as you know, all the banks has the basic role of identifying a risk and allocating a fair price to this risk. And the climate risk is one additional risk. Is a risk which we can, tackle in this way. And you have the transition risk and the physical risk, but of course to have a standard approach to that is important because you can leverage more money, you can do more and better. And but this is not the way IDFC Club started that, because we more started on the facts on reporting issue. So we have this green finance mapping, which is an exercise which has now several years, and you are participating in that. The idea is really to have a common understanding what we are doing, in which we are investing. And coming from that, we see a lot of progress coming through from the members. And we think that with this way, we can go further on the edification, also on the tools, on the common set of tools that can be used by members to make also better. And the idea is to identify what are the best tools within the industry, inside and outside the IDFC, and to promote that tools among members, recognizing that some of them are well advanced, or maybe in some sectors, and other not. And we have to take the best tools from as what are existing within the industry, and trying to make this popular among members. And as you say, recently we have updated our common principles with MDBs, which is a great issue because, as you see, two very important groups, financing green investments, having the same sets of tools and the same kind of investment, and recognizing the way that they account this investment is an important step forward. And we feel that we had made that since 2015. Now we updated these common principles. We would like to also do that for adaptation. And the idea really is to have these common principles to be also adopted by others outside the group of IDFC and MDBs. I think that this is a very important issue, and since green finance mapping is an important exercise for IDFC and also for MDBs, we think that this is maybe the approach we can also popularize in other fora.
Yeah, sharing tools and approaches among different development banks is a great way to accelerate their move towards greening their portfolios.
Just to say that, you know, on the green finance mapping, the energy is one of the most important parts. It's
Right.
more than 80%. So I would say by this way, we ensure the transition toward a greener energy.
Right, right. The next topic that I wanted to touch upon is different instruments, financial instruments for financing the energy transition. We know that bank loans and bonds are the instruments for scaling the technology, which is already known and proven. But we know that on the path to energy transition towards 2050 and 2060, there are many technologies which are yet underdeveloped, which need probably a different kind of financing, more similar to venture financing. I'm talking about carbon capture, usage and storage. I'm talking about hydrogen, which is viable at scale, economically viable at scale, and many other technologies. And probably I'll start with you, Paulina. Rosatom, I'm sure, is spending a lot of money on R&D, on developing technologies of the future. Can you please talk a little bit about that?
With pleasure. Actually, yes, Rosatom is not only pure nuclear corporation, because we have in our product portfolio, we have wind power, and we also develop a hydrogen, and we develop our storage products for energy storage facilities. And so actually, as we are a state-owned corporation, we have, of course, some special access to state money, not fully financed by Russian state government, but anyway, we have a permission to ask at least for some money to support these new developments. But anyway, we see that this state support and maybe some special instruments of maybe some subsidies, for example, that companies may have thanks to development banks, for example, some special supports for special technologies. It's really vital for these next generation technologies, because what we have faced developing hydrogen technologies is that probably yes, the first product would be really high priced. The cost of it would be really very high, but the thing is that we need to develop infrastructure for transportation, for even for green transport. You know, we need a lot of infrastructure to be built to make these new technologies applicable. And so, to my opinion, it's the most critical question to ask some special financing instruments for support, both from development institutes, both for development banks and for governments. Because that should be their job to find what is the proper way to support it. Because really companies are really very interested to invest into these new developments, new technologies. Because we see that there are a lot of discussions about this new green future, and so we understand that it's for long. So it's not for only today or these 2 weeks. It won't close probably in 10 years or even more. So we understand that we are happy to invest as a company, but we need to, and we are very grateful for such support that the development institutes provides us consulting that's really vital for these to encourage companies to make their next steps, not only to sell some existing products, but we really need to have state support. Maybe not for products itself, but for infrastructure and to support financing instruments for providing an affordable financing for these future elaboration.
Right, right. Natalie, in France, I'm sure many of the companies you are working with are looking for next generation energy solutions. How do they fund their needs? Do they fund their needs by themselves? Do they go to you? Do they go to venture funds?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's a it's a large question. Just to rebound on what on our previous discussion,
Sure.
I think we shouldn't oppose development of renewables with the diversification of oil and gas companies. I mean, the real stake is to have this company, of course, well, increase the share of renewables in their business model. So that's what we're doing, and that's the way we treat the just transition issue. But so to answer your question, well, of course, as a public development bank, we feel market failures. So we don't support the sectors that can be financed by the market, by private banks, but we do support local municipalities when they have projects either in the renewable sector or in the innovation energy sector, which means that we provide equity for local municipalities in order to develop biomass or to develop green hydrogen projects. We also provide green loans to local municipalities on these projects, and we finance the integral part with very long-term loans. So this is our specificity, and through our investment public bonds, BPI France, we support SMEs and all kinds of companies on the whole development chain, and we are really very much attached to the fact to finance the very upfront part of the process of development of this kind of companies. So we invest a lot either in equity or even in guarantees in the pre-financing phase. So in the phase of engineering, we also try to avoid this to these companies to have to wait for their investor to be able to invest in the company. So we have financing that enable them to develop the project through relay financing. But yeah, basically, I think that to develop these new fields in the biomass, in the methanization sector, in the agro-energy sector, and etc., the specific role of development banks is really to finance the upfront part, the guarantees, and also then the expert part of the activities of these companies.
That's great to hear that you have such a broad menu of support tools for companies to develop new technologies, including equity investments. And
yeah,
that's
we did develop through the several parts of the Caisse de dépôt group all the palette, as we say in French, of financing in order to really address all the needs of SMEs in this field. Yeah.
right, right. Bruno, I wanted to ask you about Brazil. I'm sure many of your clients are looking at next generation solutions which need some research and development funding. Where do Brazilian companies go for such funding? Again, do they go to BNDES? Do they go to special venture funds, to the government? How does it work in Brazil?
They came for everyone, and they knock out all the doors. And we have the same options here in Brazil. Or BNDES works. We're trying to work with the private sector. I think that the private sector must be in the skin in the game, and you use, as our colleague said, grants. It's very important, and trying to create innovative financial instruments that we can be the local in order to capture the public and the private investments. There is something that is growing very fast in Brazil. That's blended finance, which is now like use grants and loans in order to have the SMEs the startups can access a credit line. We are also supporting investment funds, corporate venture. Corporate venture is very important for innovation. So these big companies like to foment these startups, climate tax. I think that Larry Fink, CEO of the BlackRock, said that the next $1,000 billion startups will be in climate tech, and I agree with him. And so the big companies are part of this movement in order to foment these startups using their corporate ventures, and then we, as a development bank, is part of these corporate ventures funds. So the equity is very important in this sense, and we are part of a lot of seed capital and venture capital funds. So we use our funds in order to attract the private sector for these funds. So I think this is part of our role. It's like trying to create these vehicles to attract the national and the international resources, international capital. And when you have the presence of a development bank in these structures, as we have the knowledge of our countries and the opportunities, and can use this trademark in order to attract these international investors. And also linked loans. I think that these loans that we try to push these important agendas that are innovation. We can use the linked loans in order to stimulate our companies to invest in new technologies, as you said, hydrogen and the instrument for capture carbon, and also projects that will accelerate these startups, not only with capital, but also with training, with using our clients as in order to buy the products of the startups, using our knowledge, our power to articulate in order to foment these startups. So it's not only about money, but it is also about knowledge, about articulation, and trying to also develop our laws in order to stimulate the ambience of innovation in our country. And also we are trying to develop also the instruments of guarantee, because the problem is the risk. So our for example, Brazilian banks, private banks, they have the money, but they don't want to take risks at some sense, in some space. So we try to provide the guarantees for these loans and to mitigate these risks, and with that promote these new projects, and that we will make like the transition and the format these climate tax startups.
This is great, thank you. Seems like in Brazil you also have a very broad menu of options to finance such projects, from seed financing to special loans to guarantees to creating conditions for international capital to come to Brazil. Mustafa, what do you see among which models for funding new technologies do you see?
Yeah, I don't think that there is a unique model. As you maybe to put the thing to illustrate that, you know, the difference between traditional energy and renewable energy is that on traditional energy you have lots of running costs, you know, while in the renewable energy, all the cost is on the capital, at the initial capital. It's upfront costs. So usually the bank they don't like to spend a lot of 80% of the money and to pray that maybe it will work. So the operational risk is very, very high. So for this, the initial cost, the initial expenses, there is a need for capital, for non-amortizable costs. You have to spend money and without any hope, or maybe very risky hope to have a return on your investment. So for that, we need a lot of capital, and there are many countries where the market is not mature enough to raise this capital. So we need venture. We need here venture. We need to have entrepreneur willing to take the risk for investing. So this is an important thing that we have to put in place. We need also to help both the banks and the entrepreneur to make better studies. So providing technical assistance to provide support to them during this initial step, it is very important to ensure the success of the project. So to provide money for free, I would say, for both banks, and we need that. So this is why, for example, GCF, Green Climate Fund, is important for that, because they are first taking the highest risk in the project and making the project viable. This is very important. We need also long tenor loans. Not only, this is also very risky for a bank to provide a loan which tenor is more than 10 years, 15 and more, because this is adapted to the tenor of the project, in fact, on the cycle of the production. All these things means that we need to reconsider the way we are financing. It's more using traditional tools, but in a way to adjust it to the reality of the new technology. This is we need to do that here. And finally, we have also the fact that you have project approach, project finance approach for big projects, but you have also to use the balance sheets of the companies to fund not only on the approach, on the project approach base, but on balance sheets of the corporate finance. In fact, it is also important. But for that, we need to have guarantees, and this is why, for example, the guarantees that Bruno mentioned are important, so we can share the risk, because usually the enterprise has the choice between investing in increasing the production or having something which is renewable or energy efficiency. They prefer to increase the production. So by the guarantee, we give them more capacity of borrowing, so they don't need to make this choice. They can take both their core of their business and also incorporate other kind of energy efficiency or this kind of project. So we have really to look at each project and in a way that how we can improve, looking not assessing or appraising the project with the eyes of the past, looking for similarities between the traditional energy projects and the new technology. We have to try to find a way to be flexible and providing the fund and for the right risk.
Thank you, Mustafa. Sean, I also wanted to hear your opinion. You see it all. You see the capital flows.
Question. Was he expecting a provocative response? Sorry, Andre, go ahead.
You have seen it all. You see the international capital flows. You know what companies are interested in. And you definitely know that there is a lot of venture capital interest in the new green technologies, right? And there are prizes which are being announced, $100 million from Elon Musk. I think Jeff Bezos recently announced something. So which ways for funding these new technologies do you see?
Russia's got quite a few billionaires. I think you should have a quiet chat to them in a corridor and say, let's get some prizes out. But I'm with you. You know, what we actually need first is a lowering the cost of capital for implementation. If we can get large-scale projects, like the things you're talking about, at lower cost of capital. That cost of capital is everything, right? In a high interest rate environment, the cost of capital for a solar farm can be 2/3 the lifetime cost of that farm. And now, we've got to bear that in mind. So reducing the cost of capital through guarantees, selective guarantee instruments, is the main game. And that is what the rich should be doing for the economies that are developing or emerging. That's really how we get it. You know, 70 trillion, or US, has to be invested in emerging markets in the next 30 years. 70% of the global investment in low carbon and climate resilient. That's what we're looking at here. And the only way we do that is get the cost of capital down. So the bonds part, which is, if you like, a vehicle for guarantees, because then we can get IDFC members to do guarantees, is where we start, where we get the train moving, and so on. There are 500 development banks in the world. BND made a fantastic shift a few years ago to try to support the growth of the market through guarantees and for crowding in private capital. Hurrah! We need VEB to do more of that. We need every one of those other, well, there are about 460 that aren't doing any of this, focusing on guarantees, leveraging private capital, bringing private capital behind it, and multiplying the flow of capital by 10 or 20-fold as a result. That's what we need to do. That's game on, because if we do that, I'm going to tell you the main driver of cash flows to smaller enterprises is large-scale projects getting built and sucking in demand for new technology. We didn't drive the solar revolution by R&D or investing in small cap. We drove it by large-scale offtake agreements in Germany and then in China. And on the back of that, innovation crowded in. And now, solar is so cheap that my friend Paddy Manatham, the CEO of Aqua in Saudi, who won the world's cheapest solar auction early this year at 2.1 cents a kilowatt hour, says it's going to be 1 cent a kilowatt hour next year. Right? That's incredible. And that is large scale. It's about scale first. And that requires guarantees to make it work. And then the rest will follow. However, there are some things I want to throw at you. Anyway, I want to say that in the capital stack, bonds, which drives the whole machine, if you like, lending comes about it, equity and bank lending and aggregation. There are vehicles to set up here. So the ultimate aggregator in society is a bank. Right? It lends to you and I and packages it up as bonds and refinances. Let's get some differential incentives in there. The Hungarian central bank has introduced risk weighting differentials in the capital ratio requirements for green property bonds. Whoa, now that'd be cool for the Bank of Russia, wouldn't it?
Definitely.
Wouldn't be hard.
Yeah.
The People's Bank of China has introduced cheaper capital, the liquidity lending window of the central bank, if you post green bonds as collateral. Well, that'd be cool. We can do a lot of this sort of stuff with remarkably little cost for anyone in doing that. And then there's other aggregators we can set up. I'm a big fan of municipal finance corporations. I don't think we've got this in Russia. We do in Sweden. We do in Finland. We do in France.
Definitely.
We do in British Columbia. We need it in India. We need it in Russia, it's like a special fund which raises money initially backed by development banks to get the cost of capital down with technical assistance, and then works with municipalities on their absorption capacity, because let's face it, they need a bit of work. And then you lend money to them at lower cost, only for green. That's the secret. All of these things only for green. Now that doesn't mean just renewables, because green should be everything. Green property, for example, energy efficient, like your CDC portfolio, energy efficient buildings across Russia should become the norm. Finance through this, small business, everything.
But
Green
it's financed
filters.
by savings and pensions.
And there you go. And that's the solution. And that's how we get money focused on small. So certainly there's room for VC money, there's room for PE money and so on. That will flow with the scale. I mean, there's room for state intervention in some of this. You know, the US economy, one of the great myths of the US economy is it's driven by private enterprise. But in 1947, the first government-seeded venture capital was set up by the military to finance the arms race of Russia, would you believe? They ended up setting up 50 separate government-seeded venture capital companies. They all had 10-year return horizons. Current venture capital, commercial, only has 3-year. Those 10-year horizon ones funded the technical revolution. Something like 55% of the patents in an Apple iPhone, I've got one here, were funded by government venture capital in the 1940s and 50s and 60s in the US. You could do this.
Actually, the problem of Russian government, they don't like venturing.
Losing state money is
Yes.
the problem.
All of these venture capital funds in the US, every single one have made a profit. Every single one. They've just got longer term horizons, that's all. And that's the lesson to be learned. If we look at history, at the models, we will be shocked at how successful these models are. Most of the world's economy has been built with government meddling in things, from Jean Monnet in France in the 1950s to in the 1790s in the US, where guarantees drove investment in the end in the West. Unfortunately for the Indians, but it worked well for the US economy. The government intervention of these kinds of fiscally efficient measures is actually the norm, not the exception. We just haven't thought about it as green. That's all. That's the only thing here.
This is a very interesting point. You actually raised a few very interesting points. One is that it does not necessarily start with venture funding. Sometimes a technology, an imperfect technology, needs to get to scale, right? Like the solar technology. And then venture funding flies in because they realize that this is massive and there is a lot of innovation happening, and it becomes even better. But it already has a large scale. And I agree, government has a very important role to play in this process. I'll just quickly touch upon what we are trying to build in Russia. VEB is the coordinator of Russian development institutions. We have several sister institutions, some of which are venture funds, essentially. And our idea is that they develop new technologies. For example, very advanced batteries for electric vehicles or green hydrogen, etc. And then it gets passed on to VEB in order to scale it on the basis of large companies. And we think that this is one of the ways to promote these technologies. Well,
yeah, just maybe one remark is that in some examples you have seen that maybe the capital is the donation for capital is used as a subsidy and never reimbursed. In fact, this is one of the problem. It's important to also to have an approach in which entrepreneurs understand that this is a capital to make money, not to be never reimbursed. And this is one of the problems we can face sometimes.
Definitely.
Yeah, we don't make the transition unless this is opportunity. And it is opportunity. If you think of the scale of capital we need to invest this transition the next 30 years, it is the largest investment in history around the world. Where's going to be money to be made? The trick is how to ride the wave and not get swamped by the wave. That's the challenge now. We can't avoid the wave, it's coming. But a decision for every government is how to orient the investment in that government in the right direction early and quickly to take advantage of it. And this is, look, frankly, especially a problem for oil and gas states, because the oil and gas is going to disappear quite quickly. So they need to now use what they are making and have made from oil and gas to rapidly repurpose and change the economy to be ahead of the wave. Because if I'm right, and gas, well, green hydrogen is cheaper than gas by 2030, that just goes. It'll disappear as quickly as the horse and cart did in the 1920s. You know, that's how quickly it'll disappear. And look, I'm going to say it's a risk, right? I believe it. But hey, it's a pretty solid risk. So prepare everyone. The wave is coming. Get your surfboard out.
Well,
It's our role.
this has been a very positive and inspiring discussion, I would say. I think we can give audience a chance to ask questions if they have any. Or
Yes, we see question here.
Hi there. I think this is probably a question for Natalie, but I'd love to know how you balance the difference between divestment and engagement.
Yeah. No, I understood the question. How do you distinguish between divestment and engagement? Where we draw the line? Well, it's quite simple. We divest from any companies being active in the sectors that are not transformable, that cannot be transformed in order to be aligned with the 1.5 scenarios. That's why we chose to exit from coal gradually. First, we exited. We exit all the companies that were exposed for more than 20% of their turnover. Then we reduced this threshold to 10%, and now we don't have in our portfolio companies that don't have an exit strategy. Same for non-conventional energies, and for the other ones, we think that it's more efficient in terms of CO2 reduction in the real economy to engage them on real ambitious criteria rather than selling our shares and our assets, to other investors that are less responsible than us. But in order to have an efficient shareholders dialogue, you need to be serious about the implementation of your engagement criteria. That is to say, you need to really exit when the company doesn't meet your criteria. And Caisse de dépôt has chosen to exit quite recently from more than 12 companies that were not respecting its climate criteria. So we implemented in real life our engagement criteria.
So you need to show that you mean business when you...
We mean business, and shareholders dialogue can be a bit, greenwashing if you don't exit when companies don't meet the criteria.
Right.
Yeah, I think for this it's important that also the client has a strategy. And I think that is important also for the banks to have a strategy, to have a vision, to have a strategy, to have an action plan, and to deal and to steer the operation within this vision and the strategy, so we can understand where we are going. And this is the point, I mean, we have to all to do, because we have an obligation to successfully reach the net zero emission in 2050. So we have to work on this vision and to set up. And this is facilitate the dialogue within the bank, between the bank and the clients, and between the clients themselves. It is important to do that. So this is why we also work with our members to encourage them to have, to lay out a strategy and to have this vision in order to put an order in the way they are working.
Thank you, Mustafa. Any other questions from the audience?
Dimitri.
Yes, please, Bruno.
I would like to do an additional comment about some instruments that we can develop. I think that we had a role in the credit carbon credit market. So I think that development this market, for instance, in Brazil, this market could be an option for new projects, for reforestation, for example, in order to make this transition. Organized credit carbon market in Brazil, in India, and Russia could be a voluntary one, could be an option in order to foment and to boost projects related to that has that the result is like the credit carbon positive, and also on a space for the demand of the companies to buy this credit. And so we construct like a circle for the companies that want to do this the transition, to have access for this credit, and these companies like finance new projects that could be very important for these transitions. As I said, for example, reforestation of native forests, but also renewable energy and other innovative projects that could be a part of this market. And so I think that the development banks could be part of it, not to construct it, to develop this market And in this sense, I think Brazil has a huge opportunities in this way.
Thank you, Bruno. Indeed, carbon trading is one of the most important instruments, and we haven't touched upon it during today's discussion. But there are high hopes for eventual convergence of various international carbon trading systems. And we have high hopes for this COP26 to make progress in this area. But overall, I think we had a very interesting and positive discussion tonight. And I would like, I'm personally very positive about the way forward. I think the world economy will be changing very fast, and the energy mix will also be evolving very fast. And I'm very positive about the future. I would like to thank all the panelists who participated today, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dimitri.
And thank you, VEB, for the work you're doing to pioneer this in Russia.
Thank you.